Good morning, and I'd like to welcome everyone here for our July Budget Review Subcommittee meeting on General Government, Finance, Personnel, and Public Retirement. Before we begin, I would like to yield to our Senate co-chair, Senator Mike Nemes, and for a moment.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to take this time we've lost a great colleague of ours, Senator Tom Buford. He was in the Senate since 1991. He represented the counties of Fayette, Jared, Jessamine, Mercer, and Washington, and I'd like to have a moment of silence for him. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Once again, I'd like to say thank you all for being here. We will begin. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Senator Mills.
Here in person.
Senator Southworth. Senator Thomas.
Here, out of state.
Thank you. Senator West. Representative Bratcher. I'm sorry.
I'm here in my district in Louisville.
Thank you. Representative Donahue.
Yes, ma'am. Present.
Representative Goforth.
Present in the district.
Thank you. Representative Graham. Representative Hart.
Here and present.
Representative Koenig.
Here remotely.
Thank you. Representative Meredith. Representative Miles.
Here in the Frankfurt office.
Thank you. Representative Pratt. Representative Raymond. Representative Tate.
Here in person.
Representative Wheatley.
Here in the room.
Senator McDaniel. Representative Petrie.
Present in the committee room.
Representative Reed.
Here in the room.
Representative Gooch. Representative Miller. Co-chair.
Here in the 36th district.
Okay, thank you. Co-chair Nemes.
Present in the room.
Co-chair Blanton. Chair Dossett.
Present in the committee room. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to approval of minutes for June. May I have a motion on approval?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
None opposed?
Aye.
Motion on the minutes are approved. Thank you very much. Now we'll move to our presenters from the Personnel Cabinet. I'd ask our presenters, please introduce yourselves, and we'll welcome you here.
Could you turn your mic on?
Can you hear me now? Yes. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman and persons of the subcommittee. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. My name is Jarena Weathers, Cabinet Secretary for Personnel. And we are going to ask if someone can help us with the volume. We're getting
a lot of feedback. Yeah.
Would also like to remind all of those that are in our meeting here virtually, please make sure your microphones are muted. Until we get someone in here to actually take a look at this, would you mind? We'll go ahead and do our presentation.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Good morning. My name is Mary Elizabeth Bailey. Here she is.
Are you having feedback anytime you talk?
Every time I talk, or they're talking.
Oh, because you've got it coming through the computer. All right, the audio is on. I don't want to read you over. You just pull up the. It's feedback every time they talk, but the audio is muted.
There we go.
Is it because they joined with audio?
Yeah, should be fine now.
Thank you so much.
This is the correct one, right?
Yes, correct. Yes. I'll start. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Test. Good? Much better. Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate your patience. Good morning. My name is Mary Elizabeth Bailey, and I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Human Resources Administration within the Personnel Cabinet. Very happy today to be here and to present on the Executive Branch Compensation Plan and our Recruitment and Retention Initiatives. So I want to go ahead and get started. First, I want to give you a little overview and history on how the compensation plan and the salary schedule is created. First of all, it is set forth in KRS 188037, and there's 2 points that go into creating job classifications in the salary schedule. First, the statute requires us to develop the schedule using a nationally recognized system for evaluating job requirements. And second, the job classification must determine the requirements of each job classification by using factors such as, and I'm going to read these to you because they're important as we go on through the presentation, but knowledge, skill, effort, responsibility, accountability, problem solving, discretion, challenge, and working conditions. And that is important to know because often, we get calls from employees or from agencies, and they're wanting to develop, they're wanting to create a job classification and pay it X amount. And we just don't create based upon a request. It has to be based upon these factors when you create a job classification. And how we do that is, as required in the statute, the Personnel Cabinet has contracted for the past 30 years with who we call the Hay Group. They are now referred to as Korn Ferry, and we use what is called the Hay methodology to create our salary schedule and our compensation plan. And we have 1,200 job classifications right now for the merit system. And those job classifications are evaluated periodically by the Personnel Cabinet to ensure that we are still compensating accurately according to the Hay methodology. And what it is when we create a job classification, those factors that go into it, whether it's, as I said, that's required in the statute, skill, responsibility, accountability, problem solving, etc., those are given points. And when those points are added up, it equals up to a grade on our pay scale. That's how it's determined what grade fits with what job classification that an employee resides in. Okay? Obviously, majority of the employees within the executive branch do fall within the merit system, and all employees are assigned to a job classification according to their duties and responsibility. Each job classification in the classified service and some in the unclassified service is assigned to one of the pay grades in the salary schedule. Each pay grade has a minimum and a midpoint wage, and I'm going to explain why that's important in just a minute. And then under the merit system, salaries among employees may differ, and that is based upon an employee's job history. Oftentimes we get inquiries from employees saying that, you know, I'm an admin spec 3 and I make X amount, and my coworker is also in that same job classification, and he or she might makes more than me. And the reason why is maybe they have been, you know, they have more years of service in state government. Maybe, you know, they promoted into the job instead of reclassing, or maybe they transferred and where they started previously, they made more money. So, you know, there is a lot of factors that go into it. But the thing about it is, as I talked about on the compensation schedule, that each classification has a minimum and midpoint of the grade. And that's important because, as you see here, this is our current salary schedule. Okay? And it's effective June 1st, 2019 to current. And I'm going to explain this. On this, it shows the pay grade. You probably can't see here. Yes, the pay grade, and then we have in state government 2 work weeks that employees are assigned to. They're either a 37.5-hour employee or a 40-hour employee. Okay, and they are assigned when they're in the job classification. That job classification is assigned a grade. On the pay scale, as you see, there is an entry-level wage and a midpoint wage. This is very important because the entry-level wage is what every employee that is in a job classification assigned to a grade is guaranteed to make. The midpoint of the wage is the maximum amount that an employee can be hired into when you're employed into state government. So that is the difference. And so we recently increased, in 2019, we adjusted the salary schedule to increase the midpoint wage. So that way, when, you know, when agencies have the funding and have the ability to appoint, you know, individuals into job classifications, into positions, they have the ability to point up to the midpoint wage. Well, we increase that to try to stay competitive, you know, with the private sector and our local governments out there, but that is not a guarantee because not all agencies have the budget to support bringing in all individuals at a midpoint wage. In addition to that, another factor in our compensation regulation is if you appoint an individual at that midpoint wage or any wage in between, and you have other employees in that same job county, in that same job classification that have a similar combination of education experience, you also have to raise those individuals to that same amount of that new appointee. So it can be very costly to an agency. That's why the midpoint wage is not a requirement. Only the entry level is a requirement. Okay, might be a little confusing, but we can answer questions in a minute. But as you see, another point I want to make, the entry level of our salary schedule has not been adjusted since 2007. That really is becoming detrimental to recruitment in the executive branch for our state employees. And as you well know, the cost of living has increased over the last 14 years. But our entry-level wage that we are employing people into these job classifications has not. And without additional funding, we're not able to raise those minimum rates. And a lot of time when we recruit, agencies may not be able to afford anything above that entry level. So it becomes, it dampers their ability, hinders them from being able to bring in the best and the brightest at certain times. In addition to that, our last annual increment was in 2015, and we have received no increments in 9 of the last 11 years. When a 1% increment was proposed in the governor's budget, but as you know, that was not passed. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. So again, this is the continuation of our salary schedule. It ranges from grades 5 to 22. Challenges that are facing the executive branch. As you see here, over the last 20 years, we have decreased the employee count by 26%. We had 40,000 employees in 2001, and as of now, we have around 29,500. Some of this is due to natural attrition and technology. We have, there's been efficiencies that have been gained, and technology has increased the ability to do more per se with less. But on that same count, because of budgetary reductions that we have taken over many years, we have had to, reduce the employee count because we can no longer, afford what we could in 2001. So with that said, again, employees are doing more, more within their same job classification, which doesn't mean that they receive any more money for doing that additional work. The only additional compensation that they would be eligible to receive in that case is their annual increments, which we haven't received. And so therefore it also makes it very difficult for agencies and for the Personnel Cabinet to retain these employees if they're not getting any type of increase. In addition to that, our employee turnover has increased by 8% over the last 8 years. Some of our job classifications have a high turnover rate, especially in our correctional officer series. Most of you all probably know that. You hear that. It's becoming very hard to recruit in some of our job classifications. As far as incentives that we can offer to agencies based upon our compensation regulation, we have some, and they're shown here on the screen. I do want to talk about a couple of these. These are discretionary incentives. They're not anything that is required or that for agencies to give. There are two, the last two on the left side I do want to talk about. These are new: the reclassification up to midpoint of the pay grade and promotion up to midpoint of the pay grade. These two are recent changes we made to our compensation regulation, because when I spoke earlier in the presentation, the only time that an agency before this reg change was able to use the salary scale from the minimum to the midpoint was upon hire. Okay? Once an employee was hired, there was nothing you could really do to adjust an employee's salary to go between that range. And now what we did is we opened up, per se, the compensation regulation for reclassification and promotion. And prior, the old reg stated that on either of these actions that an employee would only get 5% per pay grade or the minimum of the new grade, whichever is greater. And now what it says is that agencies have the ability to reclass or promote up to that midpoint range, that midpoint salary. So it could be more than 5% per pay grade, and it's obviously more than the minimum of the pay grade. So they have the ability and the more flexibility, if their budget allows and supports that, to then increase the employee salary up to the midpoint with those actions. So those have been two very successful incentives that agencies have been able to use. In addition, on the right-hand side, we offer several premiums that agencies can also utilize. Shift and weekend is very common and multilingual as well. Two new ones that we have created there is locality and critical position premiums. Locality has been very successful because we are able, in job classifications in certain counties, if an agency has job classification that has a high turnover rate and they're having a hard time recruiting individuals in that county, they are able to pay an additional locality premium on those jobs. We have recently been doing this in our correctional officer series, the security series in the LaGrange area, because it's obviously very hard to recruit there, being next to Oldham and Jefferson. And whereas maybe in Prestonsburg at the Southeast State Correctional Complex, they do not have a problem recruiting there and employing individuals. So the locality premium has been very successful, and we're seeing agencies start to use that more and more. In addition, we also created the critical position premium. This premium allows agencies, sometimes, although we try to encourage and ensure that there is succession planning that is occurring and knowledge transfer. Sometimes there are the positions with individuals that have a very specific skill set that the agency needs, whether it's to work on a computer system or maybe a project that is, very important to the agency, that so therefore the agency can request a critical position premium to be set on that one position for that one individual to pay them more, to give them a little incentive to stay there because they are critical to the mission of the organization. That there is requirements set forth in the regulation for that, and that is limited. Very few positions can have that within an organization, but that is another premium that we did create and has been utilized as well. Moving on, recruitment initiatives. In 2017, the Personnel Cabinet started discussing and really looking at what we were doing for recruitment and how, what is our story? How are we going to become an employer of choice in the Commonwealth? We are the largest employer. We have a wide range of jobs to offer our citizens. And so we went through with two initiatives. One was a rebranding effort, and two was we procured a new talent management system. It's a Cornerstone on-demand product, and we coined it, we termed it, we call it My Purpose, because every employee needs to have a purpose, right? Every person has a purpose for their life and for their job and to have a career. And so the system is called My Purpose. It encompasses recruitment, how you apply to a state job, how your application process. It made it a lot more efficient. A lot of comments that we heard from citizens is that when they applied to state jobs, they didn't know where they were in the process. They didn't know if they were being considered, had they received their application, has someone else been hired. They would sit there forever, maybe on a register, and they weren't sure. And so now, obviously, we first of all only post vacancies that we intend to fill, number one, and then two, in this in our new recruitment system, an applicant is able to see where they are in the process. That we've received their application, that they're being considered by the agency. Maybe they've been called for an interview. So it's been very well received for that. In addition, the system also has a performance module that is electronic. Previously, our performance evaluation system was all paper-based, and 2020, January, just in time for the pandemic, we went live with electronic evaluations, which we had no idea how successful that was going to be and how needed that would be during the pandemic. And so, supervisors were able to still, although that, a lot were teleworking, were able to still communicate with their employees on their expectations and their duties and how they were doing. So it was very successful. And the last part of that system is a learning module. We have what we call Commonwealth U, and it has over 1,300 job courses in there, training courses that an employee can take for personal and professional development. So it's been very successful. In addition to that, we rebranded and came up with a tagline for recruitment. It's come for a job, stay for a career, make a difference for a lifetime. And that's what we want to do, to employ individuals that will make a difference to the citizens of the Commonwealth. We also expanded our social media presence. This day and age, if you're not on social media, you're going to be left behind. So we're on Facebook advertising jobs and Twitter. We also have a contract with LinkedIn, which is the biggest, recruitment platform out there. So we have all of our cabinets have recruiter licenses and are able to post jobs and are able to search LinkedIn's complete database for applicants to encourage them to apply. That has been very successful. In addition to that, we are very active for veterans on our two military installations in Kentucky. Very proud of that. We also have in statute an interview preference for veterans and their spouses, which that will give them the ability to initially have an interview for any job that they qualify for. In addition, our Office of Diversity, Equality, and Training have been very active in community organizations for minority recruitment and recruitment in general for the Commonwealth. I'm very excited about this expanded role that they have taken and how they are getting out into our communities for that. Moving on, for retention initiatives, as you all saw, we did update the salary schedule to increase the midpoint. And we update our regulations, as you all saw, to be able to promote and reclass up to midpoint, hoping that that will help as well. Obviously, we offer health and life, and we have a very robust, wellness programs that we're very proud of. I know our Commissioner of Employee Insurance comes over here and does testify on our health plan, and I'm very proud of that. We also offer flexible work schedules. Even prior to the pandemic, we had telecommuting and flexible work schedules and compressed work schedules, and we offered a lot of options for employees to use. Obviously, that was very, utilized during the pandemic. I'm glad that we had already had that established. So we were able to transition to a remote workforce primarily during the pandemic. And since then, actually this week, employees have started entering back into the buildings. All agencies have created a return to building plan, not return to work, because we've been working the entire time. But agencies are returning back in with, again, utilizing, hybrid schedules of, employees may work a couple of days in the office and a couple of days at home, full-time in the office. They might work a compressed work schedule. So lots of different options that we can give employees to help retain them. Obviously, we have a lot of leave options, as you all are very well aware. We have again, many different programs that we offer to our employees, adoption assistance. We have a very good employee assistance program that was definitely utilized during the pandemic with so much isolation and anxiety over COVID that was definitely very utilized and very needed in our workforce. We have also created a personnel cabinet app, phone app. I encourage you all to download it. This is a way that we are able to communicate to employees, especially those employees that don't have a computer, our highway equipment operators or firefighters or somebody like that, or park workers. If they have, we are able to let them know if, maybe during inclement weather that we're going to be, closing a building, or that we're going to be closing an office, or any type of emergency. We're also able to communicate alerts and reminders to them through this app. So it's been very successful as well. Encourage each of you to download it for sure. So with all that said, we are trying very hard to continue to create programs and initiatives for our employees to, keep them motivated and keep them growing within their, position and in their workplace for the mission. But unless we are able to increase their salaries, there's just no way that we are going to retain employees for a career here in the Commonwealth. It's just becoming more and more difficult. Okay. Do you all have any questions for me?
Yes, and we do, and thank you very much. No, go right ahead, please.
And I just wanted to add, it's been a very interesting 16 or 17 months. And what we have found is that although it's been a little bit different, it's also given us an opportunity to understand what we need to embrace with our 50,000 state employees. And when you're looking at 4.4 million people in citizens in Kentucky, and then 6% of those are even on our health insurance, Kentucky Employee Health Insurance, the importance of embracing everyone, not just with a certain area. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about making sure that we keep our employees right here. And I will personally say that state employees are one of the greatest people that I've ever worked with, and the importance of not just recruitment, but also retention. So this information that we're sharing with you today is critical, and it's something that we've worked actually together for a very long time. I feel like it's been a long time, but for 16, 17 months. And how we need to move forward to make sure that we are completely competitive outside this market. And that's what we're dedicated to do. So we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Madam Secretary and Commissioner. We appreciate it so much of you being here. We do have questions.
Okay.
I want to begin on your updated salary schedule.
Yes, sir.
And
Let me go back here.
okay. On your updated salary schedule, would that come into effect of, I know, are you seeing situations where new hires are coming in making as much, if not more, than current employees in that same grade level of position? I know I've had that brought to my attention, and would that impact that?
Not necessarily. It could possibly, but as I explained before, if someone comes into a job, if you hire a new employee into a job classification in a county, you have to look at it job classification in county, and there are other employees in that agency, in that county, in that same job classification that has a similar combination of education and experience, then those employees also have to be raised up to that new employee salary. If they don't have that, if they are outside that county, or if they don't have that same education and experience, then the new employee would make more than that current employee.
As I said, I know I've had that brought to my attention here over, actually over the spring. So that's something I would like to take a look at. Turnover rate. For across all agencies, what is our turnover rate here for our state employees?
As a whole in the executive branch?
Yes.
It's around 20%. It's, let's see here. Yes, 20% on that slide.
Do you have anything in effect that you're working on to help on it to prevent that turnover? Is there anything in particular that you're looking at that would retain those employees so that we're not losing them?
Well, like I said, we have created those additional in our those additional premiums. We created that once we saw the turnover was increasing. We created the premiums. We changed the compensation regulation to allow the increase on the reclass and a promotion. We have created additional incentives, pay incentives, as I went over. Those are things that we just changed. We just did, and so we're hoping that will help. That's what we have. We're looking at that right now.
Yes.
And Chairman, I just
Sure.
wanted to interject that you're looking at an increase since 2012. So it's been slow, but it's also something that's indicative that we're seeing in the private sector, especially if you have employees that are not getting incremental raises on a regular basis. And that's just compared to any other state employees in other states that we're seeing.
Are we also experiencing within our labor market people applying for positions here within the Commonwealth? Are we seeing the same thing that our private industry, our private business owners are experiencing now with job postings and no one applying for those positions? Are you running into that right now, where a lack of people actually applying for positions?
But it was something in our job, and there are certain job classifications and in certain counties that yes, but I have not seen an increase in that since the pandemic. I have not seen that like the private sector has. We have always had a problem, and it's been hard, like I said, to recruit correctional officers, to recruit a lot of our maintenance and trades. And also our skilled laborers. We have cooks and nurses, engineers. We struggle. There are in certain areas, especially in our veterans centers and our veterans homes, nursing homes, they have a hard time recruiting nurses. We are really struggling in the Commonwealth with that right now. There are some classifications that are not seeing an issue at all. We have plenty of applicants on our registers, but there are other job classifications that are definitely struggling. We saw that before the pandemic, and it's even it's continuing. So,
Well, as I said, I know from when I hear from the private sector
yes.
of the issues they're experiencing right now with job postings, no one applying for the jobs. And I know I've had individuals tell me they saw the market dry up back in January as you started seeing tax refunds, and then as we were seeing more money come from the federal end right there. So.
Sure.
I have wondered about that right there, how that was impacting the state. I know the governor has offered to put the $1,500 bonus in play, and are we seeing? I'm not hearing anyone from the private sector saying they're hearing more people applying for jobs at this point. So I don't know if that's been an increase. We do have questions. First, I want to begin with Representative Bratcher, who is remote.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you guys for a presentation today. That what the chairman was talking about kind of is in my vein of question. Do you guys coordinate with the unemployment office? It seems like we're paying people to be on unemployment with this federal bonus, and then we're paying people to get back to work with the $1,500. I'm not trying to throw stones here, but it just seems like it's all kind of goofy the way we're doing it. Do you guys coordinate with the unemployment offices on some of these positions you're having trouble recruiting?
Obviously, yes, we do. And also with our education, with our career development offices, we advertise out there in all of their offices out in the state. They know how to, when applicants come in, or citizens are coming in to file for unemployment or to look for jobs, they are also trained out there to assist them with logging on to our system and to filling out an application and in hiring, to apply to those open positions. So, yes.
And one of the biggest
Thank you.
One of the biggest reasons why we pivoted, I guess you could say, we were already going towards that arena of social media and being able to try to make sure that we're communicating as much as we possibly can with all the cabinets, and especially with labor. And we've done that in a big way, and we're still working on it. But that's one of the bigger reasons why we've opened ourselves up a little bit more to make sure that people know that there are some areas that we could fill in. And the difference with, I will share just real quickly, one of the bigger differences with the private sector, and there's a lot of similarities, but one of the bigger differences is that we were lucky enough not to have layoffs.
Absolutely.
And in the private sector, that's what you were seeing, of course, across the board. And we were lucky enough to not have to do that. So as far as what Mary Elizabeth is sharing is what we're looking for, as far as the openings are going to be a little different because they're very specific in its trade and in its area, as where the rest of our state employees, thank goodness, a lot of people were not laid off. So there aren't any openings in some areas.
Right. Yes.
Representative Blanton.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Comment and then a question.
Okay.
Madam Secretary, Commissioner Bailey, thank you all so much for a wonderful presentation, a very detailed presentation. So I'll get to my question at the end, and I'm going to lead up to it. And we've kindly touched on it here just a little bit, and that is employees that are already employed, and then someone coming in at a later date, and they're making as much or more than, and I get a lot of calls on that, more than you would realize, and it's not a specific agency, it's multiple agencies this is occurring in. And the fact of the matter is, it's not administration fault. It's simply the system we have, and I'm going to go back. I'm a protege of the state system, and 30 years ago, over 30 years ago, when I hired in, I was told part of that incentive was a 5% cost of living raise each year.
Yes.
Maybe got one of those or two. Then it went down to a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less. And for the last multiple years, decade, it's been zero.
Right.
So that has brought us to where we are today. because even those that started in the minimum, if they were getting those, they were incrementing up.
Yes.
And so you could maybe pay somebody a little more and they were still, but now that that is frozen,
Yes.
and they may be making the same salary for 10 years.
Yes.
And it's not changed.
Yes.
So now we've got an issue. And you all have did a wonderful job thinking outside the box, trying to come up with ways how we recruit. And we are competing against the private sector. And quite frankly, the private sector is going to pay better.
They are.
That's just the reality of things.
Yes.
So we have to have other enticements to get people to come to work. But I'm also seeing people, because of these enticements, like instead of starting with the minimum salary, that we're coming up closer to the midpoint or maybe even the midpoint, that people's leaving saying, look, I've been here 10 years and you're paying this person as much as me or more than me. And they don't find that to be fair and equitable. Not your all's fault.
Right.
Again, it's a system, and we got to figure out how we got to fix this thing so that we don't have these issues anymore. Quite frankly, we've spent ourselves into oblivion, and it started 25 years ago, and we've lost. I don't want to say respect, but we've lost who our state employees are that do the jobs out here every day, and we're taking care of every other kind of program out here there is except our state employees.
Right.
And so we got to find a way to get back into that system of providing regular cost of living increments for these people. Inflation has continued to go up for 25 years.
It has.
But their salaries have stayed stagnant for for a decade or longer at a time.
Yes.
And so, you know, what can we do? What do I tell these people? I've got people that's called me as recently as last week saying, look, I've been here longer than half the people, and I'm making the same as or less than people that hired in, that's younger than me, that hired in after me. They didn't transfer in. These were new hires in the exact same position. So how do we, one, get these people to understand? Because as much as it's a large issue, and we can look at it and understand, but when you're the one being impacted from it, it's a direct impact. How do we get them to understand that, look, please bear with us. We want to try to help you. Don't leave and go somewhere else.
Right.
So just can you all help me to address that, or give me some ideas of how we can address that? And you're right. The General Assembly has to come to the realization, we really do, that the time is now, that we've got to step up and we've got to find monies. I don't care if we have to start cutting programs.
Right.
We've got to start paying some pay raises to our state employees all across the board, to every one of them, because we're losing them and we cannot recruit them.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. You're exactly right. And it's, we have to, our state employees, we have to invest in them. They are the ones that are charged with, with running these very important programs that affect the citizens of the Commonwealth and providing these services. And if we are not attracting or retaining the best and brightest, then how is that impacting our citizens? It is. And it's something that we, I just implore upon you all to, we have to start giving the incremental raises, because as exactly what happens, it puts this major crunch on our compensation schedule and on our compensation regulations that in reality work really well when people are getting incremental raises. But when you're sitting there and you haven't received anything, and people are maybe in other job classifications or other positions coming in and making more, it becomes, what about me? What are you going to do for me? And they wouldn't have that cause if they were being raised along the way. It just is becoming extremely difficult. But to your point, we go back to, we have to follow the law, obviously, and it's set forth to ensure that those employees that have that similar education experience are making the same. And sometimes people that are appointed, they do have more than someone who has been sitting there for a while, unfortunately. And so they are able to make more. That's very hard. I'm a career employee. I've started in '95. I understand it. I've been a merit employee. I'm thankful to have been in human resources all this time, to have seen how we have evolved, and to I've seen the impact on employees, and it's very difficult. Very difficult.
Representative Blanton, we and thank you for that. We've received those same questions quite a bit, and that's one of the reasons why you said that you see the midpoint range, midpoint wage, but it doesn't answer the actual deeper problem, which is layers and layers of seeing great employees. And I myself, almost 20 years in state government, of the importance of taking care of our own monetarily. There's nothing that can substitute that. And as you can see, you've got employees that stay regardless. But now what's happening, especially since we're in this this world, I don't want to call it a new normal, we're evolving. We're just evolving. And with us to be competitive with the private market, things will have to change. Or you will continue to see what we saw just a minute ago from 2012 to today as far as our turnover.
It's going to continue to increase.
Absolutely, and let me add this: it's a twofold. It's twofold, not only in keeping pay equity and retention, but also in maintaining a healthy pension system. Nobody wants to talk about that. When I hired on in 1990, there was a lawsuit going on by a bunch of older troopers because they forced them to retire at age 55. And they didn't want to retire. They won that lawsuit. But the fact of the matter is, when I hired on, people didn't retire as soon as they become eligible. They stayed year after year after year. Representative Graham's a retired school teacher. He probably seen the same thing. But they were getting incremental cost of living adjustments, and so they had a reason to stay longer. But the way as they started taking those away, there becomes a max point to where, okay, I'm not going to be any better staying any longer. I may as well go ahead. Well, I figured mine up, and for every year that I stayed, it would take me 20 years to recoup what that I would lose in that 1 year. But man, that helped the system for every year I stayed beyond my eligibility tremendously. And so we've taken away the cost of living. I think that over the past 25 years, we wouldn't have been in this problem that we're facing today if we had continued with our regular cost of living, because people would continue to work, and because they left, they started finding other jobs because they had maxed out. And so it's a twofold situation here, not only with retention and recruitment, but also in supporting and keeping a healthy pension system. The longer we keep these people working, the healthier that system's going to be. And the less time, quite frankly, they're going to draw, because every year they work longer is the less of a year they're going to draw at the end. So it's just twofold, and I hope we can find a way to address all this. Thank you all.
I do too. Yes, a lot of the turnover occurs within 2 to 5 years of employment, and when the recruiters that work in my department, when they're going out, and I showed on the screen, we have a lot of programs and things that we offer for state employees, but they want to know what is my salary, what is going to be, what are the increases that are going to be afforded to me, how will my salary increase, what is the retirement program, and now with new employees, they're on the tier 3 retirement. It's hard to explain that, and it's hard to recruit with that. It just is.
Senator Southworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yes, absolutely.
First, I want to cover when Representative Blanton was just saying twofold. I think it's a tenfold issue. But I'm going to just bring up a couple and try to not have an entire hearing on just my questions about the personnel system, but I think I can safely say I have more constituents in this situation than anybody in this room, most likely. And so it's very important to me. The last 15 years where mostly nobody's gotten raises, increments raises. Certainly, there's been a few other things that have happened in between. And this causes, when we just started to touch toward this a little bit, this causes a compact in the whole pay scale system. So, you know, well, hopefully everybody understands, but I don't know if they do. You know, whenever we've got pay grade, 9 and pay grade 17 or so, it's pretty much the range if you want to be honest about it. And whenever these people don't have increments going up after, there's a cliff at a certain point about 15 years ago where people didn't get those. So those have been there longer. They got a few increments earlier than that. People that have come since then have not gotten increments. So you imagine this number, right? That's where we end up. So the entire pay scale is now compacted about this. And that's why every time you turn around, someone's getting paid, the wrong amount compared to somebody else. And personnel boards overrun with cases about this. And then it affects the pension because, your pension is a percentage. So people that started working here a number of years ago, and I would argue, it's probably, I wasn't here, but most likely it was all political. Somebody decided, we're going to give everybody 5%. I got to admit, when I'm doing the math, 5% is not sustainable. Whoever had the idea probably is a stupid idea. But my question for you is, can we have, as I'm doing the math, I think 2% is the number I've come to, if we were able to do that, and if it were able to be done, for an entire career, it seems like it would make sense. It would track with the cost of living adjustment that, we're seeing with the private sector, at least in my lifetime. In our recent history, we probably have, more inflation right now, but I'm just trying to think of what the number is that makes sense. And I know this is a question that we have. My first question is for us, really, as a body. We have to make a decision on what we're going to do. Can we not do something as stupid as, okay, we're going to suspend cost of living for 15 years in a row? We have to make that decision. But have you done any study or calculation on increments? Because some years we get the 1% and someone else gets 2% and all that. How does that happen, and who decides kind of in your office when you're looking at different pay grades? Is it job classifications? Some that are just keep getting left behind, or how does that get sorted out?
Okay, two parts. As far as the salary schedule, and that is determined by the personnel cabinet. Setting of the annual increments, that is something that I would have to defer to the Office of the State Budget Director to respond to that. And so I agree with in the future, it's not just annual increments that we need. We also need the funding to increase the minimum wage of the salary schedule. You cannot keep it on a 2007 rate. And we have to adjust that along with giving the annual increments, because it's great to give employees increases, and we need that, but we also have to be able to attract and to recruit, and we're not going to do that on a 2007 rate.
Okay, that puts me right to my second question, which is more on your office. Not something that we can exactly legislate here, but I think it's an important question since you're right here. The job classifications, my understanding is the personnel cabinet in your office or somebody that works over there, you select, okay, what's the education, what's the experience, all that. It's not a legislative decision. We give that to you guys to sort that out. And there are a number of agencies that have similar style positions and or a job class that actually is located in various agencies, right? So, for example, the personnel cabinet lays down how many jobs, what classifications, and so forth. Here's an example that I can think of. All right, we've got 10 people that are $30,000 employees in this agency. If we could switch it to 3 people that were $60,000 employees, we'd probably be better served. That just, objectively looking at it, we'd be better served. But it's not going to work in the personnel classification system to do that. What can you do about that issue?
Well, that's where it goes back to with our point factoring system. We have to, by statute, use a nationally known system, and so which is HAY, and it is, the statute also requires that, all of those factors that was stated, responsibility, accountability, problem solving, skills, things like that are looked at, and we have to use that system. We have to use a system. And with that equates to our salary schedule. When that is updated, then those points are then raised, which equates to a grade. So that is the way that you would have to go about adjusting the salary schedule.
And Senator Southworth, I will share that what we're also seeing is that you do have less employees that are working in state government. So the idea of lessening that and just paying them more can become quite problematic, because we're still serving the citizenry of the Commonwealth. There's still, from Department of Transportation to tourism to labor to personnel, we're still here to serve the public. So what we're saying is that getting 10 employees and turning them down, decreasing them down to 3 and giving them more money is not necessarily something that we've actually looked at. It's not that we couldn't. It's just, I'm just sharing with you that from 15 years ago, like you were sharing what was going on 15 years ago, there were a lot more state employees than we have now. I mean, we're down in double digits, even in personnel cabinet, as small as we are. So those are also issues. We want to, it's recruitment and retention. So we want to keep our employees that we have, and we want to bring in even more employees so they can not only work, but just enjoy what we have here in state government.
Certainly, and I'll close with this. There are some agencies that have too many low-paid employees that need more professional expertise that would, it's the reason we hire $1,000 an hour attorneys. Sometimes it's cheaper. So that's what I'm looking at in that, and don't think that our state system's set up the correct way, and maybe we can do something about that, but I think you could also do something, and we need to maybe look at that. Another final thing is, in the scenario that somebody who several years ago, in order to get raises for employees, maybe this is 15, 20 years that now, there was a movement in state government within personnel cabinet to start requiring college degrees for jobs that didn't really need college degrees, because that was a way to justify a pay raise at the time. Just like we've got all kinds of concocted ideas, we'll do midpoint regulation. We're always coming up with ideas how to adjust the salary schedule and call it fair. So they added a bunch of college degrees to a number of different jobs that were really more or less an experience thing. We throw out a college degree, and at the time everybody said college degree is golden, everyone should have a college degree. Need it or not, people need to get it. Well, now I think we're in a different era. Right now we're all saying, wait a second, why are we all in debt? Why don't we get the training we need, regardless of whether it has this name or that name? And so it seems like to me, especially when we require, I'm going to give an example, parole officers to have a college degree, and they're going to start at $29,000 a year. They can't even pay their student loan, much less get rent. So, and the college degree's got nothing to do with the job. They go with the training instead. The labor cabinet, same situation, inspectors and so forth. It's not a degree issue. Is there anybody looking in the personnel cabinet how to take off some of those college degree requirements on some of these jobs that don't really need it? It's not directly related, to where we could actually employ, let's say, people coming out of high school that don't have debt that could start at 30, and then we could get those increments going, and they would actually have a fruitful career.
Well, first of all, in 25 years, we've not had that requirement or the push to add college degrees to job classifications when it's unnecessary. That has never been a push from the personnel cabinet. With that said, we do periodically, like I said, perform the reviews on our entire job classification system. We are currently actually undertaking a review right now. We are in the midst of that. And that involves, the agency is very much involved. They have the subject matter experts to tell us what is needed to perform that job. In addition to that, we have we have substitution clauses on many of our jobs. So if you do not have the education experience, we'll substitute. We also take time in the military. Military experience will substitute for a lot of education and experience. So that is one additional thing that we have added as well. So it's not just degree or college specific on many of our jobs. With our current compensation system and our current methodology that we use, we cannot pay someone that is a high school graduate with no education, no experience, the same as someone as a job that does require education or does require 5 years of experience or something like that. It's not established to do that. That is not the compensation system how it's created.
Mr. Chairman, I'll pause and stop there for today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. We'll ask our committee members, let's move on our questions. I'm going to allow us about 15 minutes, and then we've got another presenter to come. Next will be...
Chairman Dossett,
yes.
may I ask a couple of questions, please?
One moment. I'm following my list right there. We'll have about 15 minutes before we'll finish up and go to our next presenter, Senator. It'll be just a few minutes. Representative Graham, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My colleague, Representative Blanton, basically made comments that I've been making for years. It's kind of scary because he's on the other political side of the spectrum, and I'm on the other side of the political spectrum. But the point being is that he brought some issues that I've been defending since I've been up here, or fighting for since I've been here. And I want to thank you, Madam Secretary and Commissioner, for the work that you do for our employees. I want to ask I'm just going to give you 3 questions and you can answer them, because I'm not going to be allowed to continue because I know my colleagues are wanting to do so. But the first question is, how many agencies are now allowing their employees to work remotely permanently? And how many agencies have decided to take on that task? If you could break that down, and the number of employees that impacts. You don't have to give that information to me today. Okay. If you can provide that to me, but you would have some course of where we're going. Sure. The other question is, and I'm basically looking at transportation, because we are losing. You mentioned in your comments about engineers leaving. The salary range, the compatibility of what our engineers and our transportation people per se. It's just not the engineers. Right. It's also those who are architects and that sort of thing. Where that salary range compares to the private sector now. And the third question is, does the demographics of the workforce of the Commonwealth of Kentucky reflect the demographics of the population of the Commonwealth of Kentucky? If you can give me some of those, you may be able to answer now. Some of them you may have to report back to me, but I would appreciate it if I could get that information. Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely. And so you can, Mr. Chairman, if they can comment on one or the 2 or the 3, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Sure. As far as remote work, I'd be happy to provide those numbers to you. I don't have them here with me or off the top of my head, but every agency is offering the ability to telecommute. Majority of agencies in the positions that are eligible to be able to do that are kind of doing a hybrid. It might be 4 days in the office and 1 day home, 2 days in the office, 3 days home, something like that. It is a mixture amongst all the agencies. There are some job classifications and some agencies that are telecommuting full-time, but that's very few. That's a very, very small group. But that is something that we can provide, yes. Okay. Okay. Yes. And as far as engineers, in majority of our job classifications in general, we are just not competitive with the private sector.
But we've been in the past.
At times.
At times.
At times. So that's information I can definitely provide as far as current, and we'll get you demographics. As well.
Okay, and I'm if you can, from the mid-level to the high level to the low entry level, if you can break that down, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you so much, and thank you for what you do. I come from a district where 50% of my population are public employees, whether it's local government, state government, cities, the school systems, the universities, the plant board. That's 50% of my population. So that's an important part of our economy here in Franklin County. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Chair Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me try to make this efficient as possible, okay? I think at least my goal, I'll talk for myself at this point. My goal is this. What size should state government be? I can't say greater or less. We're in the business of rendering services to the Commonwealth, from the Commonwealth out to the citizens and out to those that need it. Okay, that's our business. So we have to adjust to that up and down all the time. For a decade or two, the annual increments and things have not been given. We have a compressed, compacted schedule now. I understand you review the classifications, and great, but we look at turnover, what is it per agency, as well as what it is across the entire Commonwealth workforce. Retention issues, recruitment issues, what are those per agency and by regionals, geographic regionals? Those are all issues we're looking at, and my question would be, what's the plan? And that's a loaded question. Okay, so what's the plan? I'm generally disinclined to go with what I consider an insufficient and inadequate almost gimmick of let's put a 1% across the board. I don't think that helps. I think the situation has been ignored too long, and on the numbers, you put a 1% across the board, you're just actually aggravating the circumstances further. So I consider that almost a gimmick. I'm disinclined toward it, but what I'm very much inclined toward is this. What is the plan? And I look at, I'm glad Chairman Dossett wanted to put you on today and let you do a presentation, because we've got a budget cycle coming up. This is a perennial topic, and it's a topic of late in particular. And I think 2 years ago in 20, there was something about to be done. That didn't happen in 20, not going to happen in 21, but it's going to be a topic for 22. All right. Well, I'm already telling you I'm disinclined about an across-the-board 1%. It almost sounds like you'd have to have a 15, 20, 25, 30%, and that ain't happening.
Right.
So what's the plan? Per agency, as a surgical strike, which ones are we having the most difficulty on recruitment and retention? Which ones are we having the least? Which one needs the most adjustment and pay scale? Forget about the midpoint shenanigans or ad hoc adjustments. What pay scale should be given now to correct for years and decades at this point of inattention? And it needs to be data-based and data-driven, and I would challenge you to present that to me by September 1. Budget Director Hicks, he and I talk somewhat frequently. We can get together. We can get together with the Commissioner, with the Secretary, and be glad to hammer it out. But I'm going to be requesting, demanding on behalf of Kentucky taxpayers what data we're relying on, rather than a general narrative that we hear of we've not been paid enough, we haven't gotten the adjustments, we've got to do more, we're not competitive. I'm not disagreeing with any of those statements, but they're vacuous without some kind of data assessment and comparison. How do we compare to other states? How do we compare to private in the state, agency to agency, classification to classification? Were we inadequate? Were we overcompensating at, if there is such an area? And make sure we adjust so that those precious taxpayer dollars that we have are most efficiently and beneficially ROI'd, returned back on that investment, so we're rendering out the best services possible to the people of Kentucky. So that's my challenge to you. Can you get that to me by September 1, and I'll be glad to work with you in the meanwhile to get it there. Is that possible?
That sounds good.
Yes,
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
We have a lot of data and a lot of stats, and we'd be happy to share that and work with the budget office and work with you as well. So,
thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Representative Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary and Commissioner, for being here and sharing this with us. It can be distressing. As a employee side labor attorney who has sat across the table from public employers for many years and even recently, I've been through all these issues many, many times. And I hear theories about why employees are retained, why we're having trouble with recruiting, and I agree so wholeheartedly with many of the things that have been shared here today, Representative Blanton, Representative Graham. So I'm going to really break this down to a simple question, and I am a very firm believer that it does come down to pay and benefits. It comes down to that's how we get the best employees. There are many layers and factors that come into some competitive reasons with the private sector. For public employees, it's almost always been, for more than 100 years, it's been a little bit better benefits than it is pay, because there is the stability of government employee and being a government employee, and there is the lack of turnover for public employees saves the government and taxpayers a lot of dollars. So my question is simply this: if it were to come to increases or a better pension incentive or better pay incentive, what's your feeling on which one would be better to improve?
For recruitment, Secretary, do you want to
for both recruitment and retaining?
Well, I would have. I hate to say this, but I don't know if there's one better than the other, especially when we're talking about competing with the private sector. That's what the savvy potential employee are looking for, and that's definitely what our state employees want. And what we're seeing is that there's been very, very slight changes on either one of them in the past decade. So I'd have to say that we would need both. I mean, benefits is very, very important, but we just cannot get around pay. Right. I mean, so I guess I'm going to leave it at that. I mean, we cannot get around not paying our state employees more. I mean, just making that presentation that it's important. If we were living in a bubble, it might be different. And I think that, Representative Wheatley, with the labor law background, and I know we've seen it quite a bit. But employees are looking for both. They and now we have to have it when we're looking at so much on the benefit side, especially with insurance. It just goes on and on, from your physical health now to your mental health and the serious issues that we're seeing and we're dealing with. And then the money side of it, I'm going to refer to, but I just don't see if we can do one over the other. That would be my, and what we've been seeing, and what I've been seeing for the past 17 months. But
and thank you for that. As I deal with certain individual groups who do have different perspectives on that, and from the public safety or hazardous duty side, sometimes it has become benefits, even over pay. But when you get into the stagnant situations that we hear with some of the with our state troopers, for instance, it goes the other way. It can be more about pay. And I just want to get your impression on the overall for the personnel cabinet. And I certainly hope that we will be addressing these matters. I think the issues brought up throughout this whole hearing has been very important. It is something that we can no longer look at the risk. And sometimes risk gets talked about in the pension system, as far as the state can't take on that risk when we have a defined benefit pension all these years and beyond the 27 years or whatever it is that you're going to be in retirement. The risk is happening now. And we did shift from a defined benefit pension system to a hybrid cash balance system. And we're hoping there are ways, and that's what I'm working with people to perhaps sweeten that pot a little bit without affecting the pension system in too negative a way, because we've got lots of work to do in that area too. But we might be talking about that here in a few minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I've recently had spine surgery. May I stand for a few minutes?
Absolutely.
I can't sit
Well,
very long.
I'm going to apologize to our committee members. I've got 8 questions that are still wanting to be asked. we've got another presenter coming up. I'd like to ask our members, if you have questions, please submit them to our committee staff, which will forward on to the commissioner or the Madam Secretary, and we will get those answers. I want to thank you so much for being here and on the issues that we've talked about, particularly mentioning about this the pay issue. And of course, when we look back over the years that we haven't given pay increases, we have not done that for our state employees. It also must be remembered, part of that problem was due to the hole that has gone into our pension system, and that money had to be placed there. So years in the past, things may not have been operated the way they should have, but we are looking to do things better coming in the future. Once again, I want to thank Madam Secretary. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. We appreciate it. And we'll have our next presenters come forward.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate the time.
Next up from the Kentucky Public Pension Authority, we'll have our presenters come forward and introduce themselves for the record.
Okay. Get you started.
Can you just scroll
Or just
to change?
page on page.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that way.
Thanks.
I've got to share this screen with the room.
I'll go ahead and introduce myself.
Yes, please, go right ahead. And I apologize, us being short of time.
That's all right. I'm David Eager. I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky Public Pension Authority.
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry. I'm Mayor Erin Surratt. I am the Executive Director of the Office of Benefits at the Kentucky Public Pensions Authority.
Before we get started talking about House Bill 8, I'd like to give an unsolicited compliment to the two ladies that were here today presenting on behalf of... Is it off? I'm sorry. I'd like to give an unsolicited compliment to the two ladies that were presenting from the Personnel Cabinet. We, as you may know, we transitioned into 18A in 2016. There's a lot of trepidation at the time. They made it go very, very smoothly, and they've been extremely helpful since then. So they get high marks from KPPA in terms of their support of us. Back up just a little bit. I'm talking about House Bill 8. It was in the General Assembly in 2020. It was unanimously passed by the House. It didn't get to the Senate to be voted on, or it got to the Senate, but it wasn't voted on because of the COVID dismissal. So we came back in 2021. It was unanimously passed in the House, unanimously passed in the Senate. I think that says a lot for the merits of the bill itself, says a lot for the people that supported it, promoted it. And I think there were roughly 125 representatives and senators that voted in favor of that bill, and anybody who voted yes, and I thank you all who did vote yes. It really began as an idea that came with our actuary as we started to develop how do we get out of a conundrum that we were in, and that was that employers were laying off or outsourcing people at a pretty high rate, and it was forcing the contribution rates to keep escalating. I'll give you a little bit of data on that. And finally, a group of 6 representatives came together. Representative Wheatley, who's in the room, Representative Duplessis, Sheldon, Jerry A. Miller, who's on the line, and James Tipton. Those 6 people put a lot of effort into trying to figure out how do you make this House Bill 8 work. and how do you deal with some of the issues it brought up. So I give them thanks every time I see them. I'm very thankful because this bill, Representative Duplessis would describe it in one word: fair. It's fair because the employers are now going to have to pay off their own liability and not have other employers subsidizing them. I would call it impactful, and we'll talk about why going forward. But there's really a few setbacks. There's been 4 things that have happened since 2013 that have taken a broken pension system and repaired it. And we are not anywhere close, time-wise, to having this problem fixed, but we're structurally very, very much on track. So number one was Senate Bill 2, which really had 2 issues embedded in it. The requirement for the full funding of the ARC beginning in fiscal 2014. Big, we were getting, for 12 years in a row, we were getting about 40% of what we should have got. We were just digging ourselves into a huge hole. So we got to the point where we didn't have enough assets to have them work for us to get us back out of that hole. So it had to be done with contributions. It also set up Tier 3, which was mentioned earlier. The normal cost for Tier 3, in other words, that's the cost for somebody who's in it. We're paying for the accumulation of that benefit. The normal cost on a yearly basis is less than 4%. Cost for Tier 1 is 13%. That says something about how much the state is saving in aggregate by the implementation of Tier 3 versus maintaining what would have been Tier 2. So, and it does obviously suggest the benefit is not as good as was mentioned earlier. So that's the first 2. The third was in 2017, our board visited hard a look at the assumptions that we were using. The economic assumptions at that time, and that's the interest rate and the payroll growth. And historical experience would say we were way too liberal in our assumptions. We were shorting the system by suggesting that the economic assumptions were much more favorable than they really turned out to be in the past and are proving to be going forward. So that was number 3. Number 4 is House Bill 8. I think we will look back in 20 years. Those of us who were involved in pensions or who are still here, we'll look back and we'll say House Bill 8 was the equivalent of Senate Bill 2. I mean, it has a major impact, and it's allowed the system to avoid the transfer of cost for running that system to be borne by the state at higher and higher contribution rates. The calculated contribution rate for 2021 was 85%. It could easily be over 100 within the next few years had we not gotten this bill. So we really are saving. It's going to save the state a lot of money, not in the immediate, but in the long term. So I do want to say 29 years, 2049, this system should be fully funded if we meet our assumptions, if we pay the contribution. And those are the 2 ifs. If we can earn the rate, which is now reasonably stated at 5.25%, conservatively stated, if we can do those things in 2049, it'll be 100% funded. But like a mortgage, we're right now at 14. We were at 12, and then we got to 13. We got to 14. Like a mortgage, in a mortgage in your early years, you pay your principal goes down only a little bit because you're paying mostly interest, and that's exactly the way the funding of this works. So we have, the first year of the recovery, we reduced the unfunded liability by 0.5%, 50 basis points, and then a little less than 1%. In the 29th or the 30th year, it'll be 8%. It's going to go from 92 to 100. It's like, again, like a mortgage. My last mortgage payments all goes to principal. So today, got 4 points. I want to just give you highlights of the bill itself as a reminder. We're going to talk about compliance, what the quasis are going to have to do in terms of reporting leased and contract employees. There is an appeal process for them to appeal the amount of liability that's been allocated to them. We're going to talk about the rationale of that policy. We've had a lot of discussions with a lot of employers. But we maintain a pretty firm position on protecting the members' information, and we'll explain why. And then we'll give you the status of the appeals process. Highlights. Essentially, it changed the funding method for the non-HAS employers to, instead of a percent of payroll, like 85%, it's going to be normal cost, which right now is 10.1, and their share of their actual unfunded liability spread out over a 30-year period. They're going to pay off their own debt. Nobody else is going to pay for it, and they're not going to have to pay for somebody else's. I go back to Duplessis' comment. It's fair. So beginning July 1, 2021, these employers will pay the normal cost, 10.1% again now, plus that allocated cost. It says here for cost for new employees, it's all employees. But any new employee that comes in, they're not going to have to pay 85%. So they're not disincented for hiring people. They're not incented for laying people off, because layoffs have no impact on what they owe. So let me give you some information here. Old method. I've got some data that goes back to 2009. It went up through 2018. I asked staff to update 3 more years, so it's 13 years. That's the reason it's kind of an odd number. But in 2009, the contribution for the percent of pay was 10%. It should have been 28.6%. That's what the actuary said, and there's the part of the problem. The actuary said put in 28.6, the state put in 10. But nonetheless, 28.6, that's exactly 1/3 of where it is today. So it's gone up by 3-fold. Again, the actuary's calculation, and now what we're paying. In 2009, regional mental health departments had 8,399 employees being reported to us. 8,399. Today they have 1,944. So I'll say it again, 8,399 13 years ago, 1,944 today. That's a 77% decrease. And what that's done is, as I've said many times, it's just shifted the cost of paying off that unfunded liability to other people, namely the state. The state in that time, in 2009 reported 33,820. That's quite a bit less than the 40,000 that was shown earlier, but that was 2001. So there's quite a decline between 1 and 9. The state went from 33,820 to 31,849, went down 6%. So the quasis are going down in the area in aggregate more than 60%. The state's going down 6. So again, I will say the implementation of this does shift liabilities. There are some agencies, when you recalculate the unfunded liability back into a percent of pay, which they can do for federal reimbursement, more agencies, costs went down than went up. Some of them went down a fair amount. Some of them went up a fair amount. In aggregate, the state's going to pay 3% more. In aggregate, the quasis are going to pay 8% less, 8%. They're a smaller portion of the total. But that's a one-time bite. And I'm going to be presenting this afternoon at A&R, and we've got the results of estimating the impact of this wonderful market we've had. Our assets are up over 20%. That gets spread out over 5 years, but we've got the calculations on the impact of that, and it's meaningful. So we're going to see a 3% because of House Bill 8. You're going to see a pretty favorable number based on what the markets have done for us. Aaron, you want to?
Sure. Do you want to change this?
Yep.
Okay. So in addition to changing the funding model in House Bill 8, there were some additional statutory requirements that were made. First, it requires that the KERS non-hazardous employers begin providing information to us on all persons who are not directly employed by the employer. This includes those people providing service as independent contractor or leased employees through a staffing company or any other employment arrangement. I will say that employers are supposed to submit contracts to our legal department for review prior to allowing someone to provide contract services, but that doesn't always happen. But this bill is providing that those persons be reported to KPPA. Now, there are some exceptions to some of the non-hazardous employers that have to report that. I'm sorry, I don't have those committed to memory. They are in Section 7 of House Bill 8, but the employers receiving the subsidies are the ones that are going to need to be reporting this to us. The text in yellow is actually on the wrong slide. This is actually going to be an ongoing administrative responsibility of KPPA staff, so we'll go over that later. We'll go to the next slide. Now, the importance of reporting these employees and the additional persons that are contractors, because these employers receiving the state subsidies towards their retirement costs must meet the following requirements, or they could lose their subsidies. So in House Bill 8, it does say that it is the intent of the General Assembly to provide future subsidies to help with the retirement cost. And so at least 60% of their workforce must be payroll employees during fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24 to receive those subsidies, and then 80% during fiscal year 25 and beyond must be considered employees.
Yes. Excuse me, Aaron, but we have one employer who has 1%, and 99% are contract employees in a subsidiary that they own.
So, as I said, now, as you all, I'm sure, are aware, but for anyone listening that may not, KPPA doesn't have anything to do with the subsidies that are given to these employers. We sometimes get calls asking questions about that, but we are going to be, KPPA will be responsible for collecting this data and reporting it to LRC and the State Budget Office each year. In addition, House Bill 8 provided an appeals process for employers. Employers can appeal. They had up until July 1st to appeal whether an employer that is included on their liability list, an employee included on the liability list was not, they can appeal that they were not the last employer for that employee, for that member. And additionally, they can also appeal that the employee was hired through a contract between the executive branch and the employer for services provided to the executive branch. Also, if the employer is a community mental health center which was contracted to provide services at a facility previously operated by the executive branch. So they can appeal. They had the option to appeal those three things. A final decision on those appeals will be made by the Kentucky Retirement Systems Board by December 31st, 2021. And it will be, then we'll work with the State Budget Office. There's still ongoing discussions with Budget Director Hicks about the process for moving these individuals' liability to the executive branch. So that's still ongoing.
I hate to rush you, but we're gonna run out of time here.
Okay.
Could we kind of speed through? We've got about 10 minutes, and I'm sorry. I apologize so much.
Yep. Let's move
That's
ahead.
fine. And then, let's go.
Sure. So let me say one thing that the statute says. Thankfully, the liability that's calculated by our actuary GRS is the liability. You can't debate that. You can say we're not the last employer. You can say other things, but the liability is a liability. So we agreed to provide information. Maybe I can just summarize it verbally. We agreed to provide information to the employers. We'd give them the names and Social Security numbers of the people that are included in that calculation. If they were an employer who could not leave the system by statute, we also gave them the liability for each employee, although I constantly ask, what are you going to do with it? And one person said, well, I know my liability, and I can look at other people and say, that doesn't make sense. Well, they don't know past service credit. They don't know compensation. They don't know whether they bought time. They have no way of knowing. There's absolutely nothing they can do with that information except be curious about it. So we gave it to those that can't leave because they can't use it detrimentally. Those that can leave, we didn't give it to them. We gave them name and social security number. And we had long debates. There's going to be a bill, I think, coming in that's going to deal with that issue. We oppose it, and I'll tell you why we oppose it. And I'll kind of summarize. The more information that goes to employers in their data, the more likely that data that should not be in the public, or it could, there's more data to be hacked. There's more rows to plow there. There's no reason, if they don't have a business reason to have that information, there's no reason for them to have it. That's our position. You can be hacked. The second big issue is the members have a right to privacy. Employers shouldn't know. If the employer's going to try and replicate the liability, they're going to need to know a lot of stuff. They're going to need to know who's their beneficiary is. It's none of the employer's business who their beneficiary is. They're going to want to know start dates and when they'll be eligible to be retired. That's not their business. You probably think of a whole lot more. Past compensation. Did they buy service or not? Our view has been right along that says if it's not for, we'll give you, if it's for a business purpose or we're ordered by the court, we'll do it. Otherwise, we won't. And so I've lost a few friends on that, I think. we had some spirited conversation, to be frank. But that is our position. I'd like to just kind of look at my notes and see if there's anything else I didn't cover. We did have 81 employers requested data. 54 were provided name, social, and liability, even though I said I don't know what the heck they're going to do with it. 22 got the names and social securities. 5 more who are eligible to leave. We did provide the liability, but we agreed that it would go to their CPA. Their CPA would sign a non-disclosure, and that was accomplished. I think I've speed chest there.
I apologize so much. I do want to thank you for being cautious with that information of they're getting out to the public. I had a fraudulent unemployment claim filed on me last week. I received in the mail, and it's nothing more aggravating than to see that happen. Do have a question. Representative Meredith has a question for you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 real quick ones. The first one, real quick. You mentioned the 2009 numbers. The 28.6% was the calculated contribution rate. The 10% was the rate that was actually put into force. Was that a General Assembly decision, or was that a board decision of how that rate was put into force?
That'd be the state budget. We have nothing to do with that. We do commission the actuary who comes up with the recommended rate.
Okay.
But we don't have any control over whether we get it or not.
All right. Second question may be a little bit more difficult, and I'm thinking about the quasis here, Director Eager. Obviously, there was probably some funny business with regard to shifting to contracted employees or employees through other secondary agencies with groups and things of that nature. However, I have often wondered, and this was a discussion that Representative Blanton and I were having up here a little bit ago as well, with some of those secondary agencies or those contracted positions, it could have been more that folks that they were trying to recruit were looking at wages more than they were looking at the pension benefit on the background. Has there been any look at that piece of that, as far as making a move, not based on just the pension contribution, but based on the fact that it was a decision made per the salary that they could pay somebody who didn't want the same kind of benefits or wasn't as interested in the pension type benefits. I know one of the things that was mentioned in the last presentation was the nursing homes, the veterans nursing homes in the state. And I think by law and by statute, we had allowed some contracting for those types of positions for that very reason. And I just wondered how prevalent that might be in the quasi world as well.
So if I understand the question, did some get out of get out to avoid paying the 85% now, and they turn around and use some of that money to subsidize additional comp. Is that?
I don't know that that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is I think that's the position that you all have taken with the retirement board, is that it's purely for that situation. But I think as they look at recruiting people into those positions, sometimes the people that they're trying to recruit, the pension is not something that is interesting to them.
Yeah.
They want a higher salary. They don't care about the pension benefit that much. And so I was just wondering, have you all had any thought on how much of this is actually somebody just trying to skirt the 80%, or how much of it is somebody who's actually trying to create a benefit structure that is advantageous for the types of people that they're trying to recruit?
I would say if you apply that broadly, it's being pretty generous. The intent, we believe, is not purely to reduce costs, but largely to do so.
I do have a couple of questions for you. I did want to ask, are you tracking each employer's contribution going into the on the accrued liability? Are we keeping up with those employers of what they're contributing?
Everyone individually, yes.
Is CAPA alerting those employers whenever they reach their contribution level? Or will CAPA alert them when they reach their full contribution level in the future?
You're just talking about invoicing.
Yes. You mean over the...
They won't be fully funded for 29 years.
Yes.
But they receive an invoice each year.
Okay.
They got to pay.
So they will be notified.
Yeah.
They receive a monthly invoice to be paid.
Appeals. Mm-hmm. Are the universities appealing? Do you have appeals ongoing?
Do you know?
We do. I don't know if all of them have, but I know of 2 that have.
Please.
So, out of roughly 110 agencies, what do we say? 44 have appealed.
Okay. I apologize for making you have to rush through. I'm so sorry. But
I hope we got the message out.
You did. Do any of our other members have any questions? Thank you both so very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. It has been very insightful for us to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
For the committee, our next committee meeting will be on August 4th at 9 a.m. here in room 131. We have a motion and a second. We are adjourned.